Welcome to the ValuePro Show, where value pros get value ready. Hi, I'm your host, Bruce Scheer, and today we have a fantastic episode lined up for you. We're talking about first impressions, those crucial moments that can make or break relationships with your clients, colleagues, and audiences. Our guest today is none other than George Torok, an international keynote speaker and executive presentation coach with over 29 years of experience helping executives communicate with confidence and clarity. George is an expert in making that right first impression, and he's here to share his insights with us. Get ready to learn how to turn those first critical few seconds into lasting impressions that stick with your audience for years to come. Well, George, hey, thanks so much for being on the ValuePro Show. Everybody, this is George Torok. If you're listening or watching, you're in for a treat. Now, George is a consummate pro working with executives and helping them with their presentation skills and capabilities, confidence, etc. And I had the honor and delight of being on George's show. He's interviewed over 600 executives on his own show, and I got onto his podcast. And George, I was re-listening to it, and damn, I sounded good. You got the, no, I'm joking, but you got the best out of me. And so I pray that I can do you justice the way you did me justice. So, George, the topic today is how to make the right first impression. And I wanted to give our listening and viewing audience just a little bit of context, George, before we get into it, kind of what brought us here together in thinking about first impression. So, we've crafted a buyer-ready type of framework. We call it the value-ready framework. And it's got 4 key stages. If you're a B2B seller, selling value, enabling your buyers with value at each critical touch point of the buyer's journey, we've got 4 phases: build trust, understand needs, deliver insights, and then finally drive execution. Those are 4 phases, and then we have 10 disciplines under each one of these phases. One of them is called under building trust, which, gosh, if you're going to sell anything, you need to build trust. You know, everything kind of starts there. And I was talking to George around this framework and talking about, hey, George, you know, we've put a lot of emphasis into helping people be credibility ready. And George really kind of, said, Bruce, we need to do a drill down into what it means to make a great first impression. And, I've been reading George's books, and George is a hell of a writer. But one of the things he was talking about is just the seconds it takes for somebody to formulate that first impression. And so we really wanted to double down there. It all starts there. So, George, why don't I kick it over to you to begin this dialogue? Just why get your first impression right?
And Bruce, you have made a positive first impression with the start of this podcast, because you talk about how it's important and what your audience is going to get from you. So your first impression in general should be about the listener. And why is it important to get it right? Because we make decisions quickly, and we make them even quicker today. And whether it's seconds or fractions of a second, we look at you. When we first look at you, the first thing we do is we decide, who's this person? What's he mean to me? Should I bother listening? Does he really care about me? And then we might start listening to the first words. And if the first words reinforce a decision we've already made not to listen, we go, well, this is going to be a waste of time. Or, this guy is different. He's talking about me to me. I think I'll listen. Just imagine the magic in that moment. That's a magical moment to grab attention and make a powerful first impression, which can last for years. It's curious. I attended a meeting with a CEO event this week, and there are about 300 CEOs in the room, and many of them I knew, I've seen before. And 2 of them in our discussion recalled a first impression that I had made on them years before the pandemic. Imagine the power of that.
Absolutely. No, Yeah, the first impression, I guess the phrase goes, is, could be the last impression. I've spoken a lot about that in terms of being credibility ready. And and it might even be the last time you get to talk to somebody if that first impression doesn't deliver. If it does, it could be a lasting impression that just goes on and on and on, just like how you talked about those CEOs and the impression they had of you years ago. It's stuck in their brains, which is just so powerful, so interesting as well. George, I bet there's a lot of human biology stuff going on in there chemically, how we're retaining that memory, et cetera. I don't think we'll probably go there, but God, the human condition is so interesting. But that first impression, it does get implanted. And I think it's incredibly important. If you want somebody to tune into you, as you say, you really need to nail it and just get it right. And that's why I've spent $25,000 or $2,500, excuse me, not thousand, remove a zero, getting the nice camera, getting nice lighting, et cetera, even as part of this ValuePro show, just trying to punch up that first impression.
And Bruce, you raise a valid point there. When the pandemic came along, we all stumbled into the virtual world with cameras and microphones. And at that time, people accepted it's okay that you look like you're in your house coat and you're in the kitchen and there's something cooking in the background, and you've got a lousy microphone and the sound is lousy. And we accepted that at the beginning of the pandemic. But then as time went on, our standards started to get higher and we expect more. And yet, I'm surprised there are still people today that I have meetings with, and these are executives. These are senior executives who should be setting the example for their teams. And what do you think their clients are going to think about them when they call them up? Let's have a virtual meeting, and their sound is lousy. Their video, the lighting is lousy. What kind of impression does that make? You don't even care how you're coming across. Whereas if you were to show up in my office, I expect you had a shower, you combed your hair, you put on whatever makeup or whatever makes you smell better, and you wore a shirt that's been pressed, not the one you've been wearing for 3 weeks, and you look like you belong here. And that's all happening in seconds. I see you walk in the room and I go, who the heck is this? Is that the guy I was talking to on the phone? Man, he looks terrible. Or, wow, this Bruce, look at him. Look how sharp he looks. Look at his face. Look at the energy coming from him. I'm going to listen to this guy.
Yep. No, it's so critical. George, I was working with a client called Domo out of Salt Lake City area, and I was talking to one of the executives there in the C-suite, and I was telling him about just how important it is to make the right first impression and show up credibility ready. One of my catchphrases, anyways. And he goes, Bruce, God, you're so right. I guess I wasn't thinking about it this way, but as you were speaking, Bruce, I remember an executive, CEO, had a meeting with our executive committee, our exco. And we were looking for a vendor, and we had narrowed the vendors down to 3 vendors that had to meet with the exco so we could choose one. And this was a multi-million-dollar contract that we were giving to a vendor. So, the exco had to get involved at that level. And the CEO of one of the top vendors that we were considering decided to take our meeting from the airport. And he goes, Bruce, after that meeting, we all just talked about it. We all had a bad feeling, said, nope, they're off the list. And which was so darn interesting to me. And he goes, I wasn't really conscious of it, Bruce, until you talked about it. But that's probably the reason. He chose to take the call from the airport. He looked terrible, sounded terrible, everything went wrong, hence off the list.
And Bruce, here's an example of, this is a client that I coached them to present a presentation. They were bidding on a $10 million contract. And the president brought his head of manufacturing with him. And so the the head of manufacturing started the presentation, and he had on the table in front of him a handmade birdhouse. He's pitching a $10 million deal, and on the table he's got this handmade birdhouse that he had made when he was a child. And he's holding this in front of this, immediately grabbed everyone's attention. And he said this. He said, when I was a little boy, my grandfather taught me to make this birdhouse. And he taught me to make a quality product. And that's what I still do today in this business. And when we serve you, I will ensure that you get quality. How's that for an opening?
I love it. I know you're going to break all this down for us and why that's an awesome opening and why that created a positive first impression. But yeah, that's a zinger. That's a huge winner, George. What a great story. How fun. Well, let's get into it. So we talked about the importance of it, and when it goes wrong, it can go really wrong, multi-million dollars of wrong, and when it goes right, the other way around. But then also just, God, do we respect ourselves? Do we want to show up with confidence and just exude that and nail it, as part of our first impression? So boy, George, it's time to teach, how to make the right first impression. And just to prompt you, George, a little bit, what are some of the steps that we should take? We can dig into that if you'd like.
One of the first steps is to make visual impression. And you want to disrupt their thinking, their vision. So in this case, the image of the handmade, child-made birdhouse was a visual disruption. So that was something they weren't expecting, which raised their curiosity. And now they're and this is not something that's offensive, and there's no harm in saying, well, I want to know more about this. What's this got to do with our $10 million project? This is kind of interesting because it was a sophisticated project. So a birdhouse is not the technology they're looking for, but it demonstrated a concept. And the speaker tied the analogy of a little boy learning from his grandfather into lifelong principles that everyone can relate to. Mm-hmm. The other connection that he made, again, the first impression, he talked about his grandfather, who he clearly honored and loved, and he showed how his grandfather helped him as a little boy learn a lifelong lesson. And each of us, the one thing we all have in common, you want to connect with anyone, you talk about family, because we all have family. So when you talk about your grandfather, I think about mine. So you now trigger memories in my mind. You touch those chemical reactions that bring back the good feelings of my grandfather. And so now I can connect with you because, we both have or had grandfathers who were good to us, who taught us lessons, who we remember fondly. So now we have this strong connection, and then you build on it as a speaker. So that grandfather family connection is powerful. And in this case, the group of people he was speaking to were a group of old guys, old men, probably were grandfathers themselves. And they're probably sitting there thinking, oh, yeah, I help my grandchildren with things too, and it's probably time I should give them some more of my grandfatherly advice.
God, George, you're really making me think he was creating an emotional connection with them, big time, as they were thinking about that. Sentiments, good sentiments, bad sentiments, if they were underperforming as grandfathers, but really hooking them on that thought. Yeah, that's really powerful.
The emotional connection is powerful, and the lack of an emotional character is boring, is dissuading. And I'll give you another example of one connection that didn't work. I got a phone call, and if I'm in my office and I'm not deeply into something, I'll answer the phone because I'm curious. I want to hear how people. I picked up the phone, and a person who I don't know, who doesn't know me, their first words are, they haven't identified themselves. They haven't said who they are. The first words are, how are you today? And I'm thinking, who's calling me And why would you care how I am today? Do you know me? Do you care about me? And I said that. I said, is that what you call it? Ask how I am? Because I don't know you. And then the person's so feebly, well, I was trying to be polite. And I said, no, you're not polite. You're actually being insincere. You're pretending that you care when I know that you don't. You're trying to sell me something, aren't you? And then the person made an excuse. Well, I'm sorry if you're having a bad day. Well, it went from bad impression to worst impression. And I said, well, this conversation is over. And yet people don't get it. Those first words stop. And why do people do that? They say, how are you today? Well, if we're meeting, if I know you, I have the right to say, how are you today? Because you and we care about each other. We have acquaintances. We have a relationship. So I can believe that you actually care and you want to hear something. But if I'm meeting you for the first time, don't use those trite, meaningless phrases that everyone else uses because it doesn't connect. What you do is you just put yourself into that group of people who don't care. You think when you care because you say, how are you today? I know you don't, because you couldn't be bothered to come up with a better saying. Hey, I know you don't know me. I'm with this company. Is that something that you're considering looking at in the next 3 months? Or here's a special offer. Would you like to hear more about it? Oh, okay, maybe.
Yeah, you're talking my language. You're showing up relevant, etc. Hey, George, one thing we could talk about if you're game. I was reading your fantastic book, Open Your Presentation with Pizzazz, How to Win the Audience at the Beginning of Your Presentation. So, you are, the consummate executive coach and how to have a presentation with pizzazz, which I love. You don't want one without pizzazz, that's for darn sure. But within your book, you had this powerful framework, which I think sets us up for creating that fantastic first impression. Let me kick us over to that. And you were calling it in your book, the 5 keys. Would you mind telling the audience about that?
Yeah, these 5 keys, and for listeners who can't see it, I'll read them out and then I'll go through them. The first is confidence, and understand, credible, relevant, and important. So the 5 keys in your opening is, first of all, for you, when you are the speaker, when you're the communicator, to demonstrate that you are confident, that you convey confidence, because your confidence attracts our attention. When we see you and hear you sounding confident, we want to listen because, this person is confident. They must believe in their message, as opposed to someone who is shuffling around and washing their hands or playing with their ear or with their jewelry. We're going, this person obviously doesn't feel good about the message. It's probably not worth listening to. And we want to know the next key. You need to demonstrate to us that you understand me. That you understand me as an individual. Not that you understand the group, that you understand me. Talk to me. And when I believe that you understand me, I'm going to listen. I'm going to think, there's something in it for me. This person understands me. They're talking to me. The third key is that you want to come across as credible. Credible in your message, credible with your authority. And by the way, please don't, and especially if you're making a sales presentation or presentation of any sort, don't start with this line. Don't go into this silly mess where, and now a little bit about me. Guess what? Soon as you say that line, we shut down because we don't care. And we also know it's probably not going to be a little bit, because your idea of little bit is a lot more than my idea. So to avoid the little bit about me, you need to arrive with credibility, perhaps the way you've been introduced or based on the relationship you've had to start the conversation. So you need to demonstrate credibility for this topic, not for everything, just for this topic that you're planning to talk about.
George, one thing I'd talk about on credibility, And I love what you say. You shouldn't be talking about it, hopefully, because people will turn off or see you as having a big ego, and maybe I don't even want to deal with this person. But we work with sellers to really punch up their LinkedIn profiles and post the right things, and because even myself, when I'm doing my outreach, I constantly see executives going to my LinkedIn profile. Who is this guy that just left me a message, that shot me an email? Is he worth talking to? And that's where I'm, trying to show up in a very credible way. Even this show that we're producing, the ValuePro Show, my hope is our target prospects and executives will see that and go, hey, pretty solid stuff, and that, that's credible. And then we can continue the dialogue.
And Bruce, you're right. The first thing that all of us, I think, do when someone reaches out to contact us, we go search their LinkedIn profile. First thing we do. I noticed, Bruce, on your LinkedIn profile, here's what stood out for me. You said that my mission is to inspire others to inspire others. And that captured my attention. I thought to myself, I don't think I've ever seen that before. So it's different. And I also like it. Here's why it appealed to me. Because it's not about you. It's about other people, and that whether it's me or my colleagues, my team, but you are working to help others. That is a positive first impression, strong impression. So yes, it's credible. And there are so many people who make the mistakes of writing their LinkedIn profile to meet the criteria of an AI resume evaluation. Yeah. So the ones with the silly phrases like, results-oriented professional. Really? What the heck does that mean? And by the way, are you suggesting that everyone else on here is not results-oriented? And do you think when you say results-oriented, that makes you stand out? If you do a search on results-oriented on LinkedIn, guess how many people you're going to find? Tens, hundreds of thousands. I did a search months ago. I don't know what the number is now, but yeah. So those silly cliche phrases don't build credibility. Don't make a good first impression. No, not at all.
Yeah, perfect. Well, we talked about confidence, understanding that buyer, making sure they know that you understand them, credibility, being credible. Then what are the other two that you have on the 5 keys?
The next key is that it's relevant to me, the listener. Your message is relevant to me. If I get a call from the duck cleaning people, I'm not looking for that. I'm not interested in that. I might someday, but I'm not today. It's not relevant to me. If you're selling childcare services, well, I'm long past that. So, in fact, I probably should be looking soon for senior care for myself. But the childcare. So the message and the service and the value that you offer must be relevant to my needs, my desires. And you might say, well, everybody needs what we're selling. No, guess what? They don't. Oh, maybe they need it, but they don't care. It's not relevant to them right now. Something else is more relevant. So otherwise they don't listen. We don't listen. The next key is that what you're saying is actually important. And that means that it's important. It's in high importance, because there's a lot of things on our to-do list that we'd like to do, but it's not all important, most important today. It depends what's important to us. And this point is that, and actually the relevant and the importance is one reason why we need to follow up if we see possibility. It's why, because what you're offering today, what you are offering to me today, you might have confidence, you might understand me, you might be credible, but if it's not relevant now or important to me now, it might be in 3 months or 6 months.
Yeah.
Which is why we have a database to remind us to follow up, is why we publish on a regular basis, so that we put out content that's relevant, so that when it is relevant and important, people go, oh, there's Bruce. Oh, yeah, he's the one that sends me that information. I like what he writes. I haven't talked to him for a long time, but we did talk 2 years ago. I think it's time I should reach out to him because it's important and relevant now.
Great points, George. Well, let me just do a recap here. And I wanted to mention something to you that I hope will get you to laugh a little bit. But the 5 keys: confidence, understand, credible, relevant, and important. So really well articulated. I love the rule of 5s. On confidence, George, my brother told me a long time ago, he's a extremely seasoned trial attorney. And he's so good that when the stakes are super high and it's a big bet, very often he'll come in and replace the current attorneys because, hey, now it's big time and we got to nail it. And my brother was telling me a long time ago that my clients hire me for my confidence. Mm-hmm. And he goes, Bruce, if I'm right, I'm going to be damn right. And if I'm wrong, I'm going to be damn wrong. But they are hiring me for my confidence, and I got to show up with confidence. And it should, I learned that such a long time ago, but so important. I've seen him work the courtroom, work the jury, and he just shows up with the confidence and belief and what he has to say. He's got integrity. He's got a moral compass. So he's not lying or creating a charade. But that really does flow through, and it's infectious, effectively.
And that is overpowering it. It's when you see a person who knows what they're doing, who has integrity, and is confident in their message and in their service. That is so attractive. It's magnetic, and we just want to hear from that person. And because we know that person means what they're doing and what they're saying. That is so overwhelming.
Yep. No, it's awesome. Well, hey, let's turn the corner here, or perhaps even conclude, George, just on, what didn't you mention that you might want to mention to people, some, takeaways around how to make that the right first impression, one that's really good versus not so good.
Well, here's a tip and a technique. First of all, if you're speaking, ensure that people are listening. So don't start talking until they're listening. Some people start talking right away, and I see this a lot with people making a presentation, whether they're in a networking event, they're talking one-to-one, or whether they're speaking on a stage, or they're walking up to the stage. They start talking on the way to the stage or to the way to the front of the room. People aren't listening yet. So first, if your first words are important, which they should be, then make sure people hear them. So here's a technique that I recommend to any time you speak. When it's your turn to speak, pause. Pause before you speak. So, for example, let's say you're at a discussion in a group, and they say, "Well, Bruce, we haven't heard from you for a while. Tell us your insight on this." So when they say, "Bruce, your turn to speak," depending on the room, you might stay seated or you might stand. If it's a bigger room, you need to be seen. So let's say you're going to stand. So what you do is you stand up and you look around the room, not say anything for the first 2-3 seconds. You ensure that everyone is looking at you, and then you say those first words that are on purpose, on point, and people hear it and they go, "Wow, Bruce really knows what he's saying. Let's hear more." Powerful technique.
Yeah, absolutely, George. Yeah, and I love that in your book. Again, I'm going to mention the book title so people can grab it. Open Your Presentation with Pizzazz with George Torok. Great book. But I loved how you framed that up front there. Pause for 3 seconds. And if you're really confident and want to own the show, maybe even 8 seconds, I think you were saying, just let people go, "Whoa, I wonder what he's going to say." But that's powerful, and it gets everybody into the posture ready to listen versus just coming out rat-a-tat-tat. You go ahead and pause. So I did like that a lot, George. That really, really makes sense. I'm sure there's science behind it too. Well, George, thanks for that. I know you're going to have so many different tips, etc. How can people connect with you, George?
The easiest way to connect is I suggest that get a hold of my weekly presentation tips, and a place to find that is at toroktips.com, Torok, T-O-R-O-K, tips.com.
Excellent. Oh, wow. What a lovely URL. So toroktips.com. I'm racing there myself. So George, thanks so much for being on the ValuePro Show. This is going to be really helpful to a lot of people.
Delighted to be helping people and being part of your mission to inspire others to inspire others.
Yeah, that's what it's all about for me. Thank you, George. Really appreciate it.
Glad to be on the ValuePro Show, Bruce.
And that wraps up our conversation with George Torok, a true master at helping professionals elevate their communication game. I hope you took away some powerful insights today about how to make the right first impression and why it matters so much. If you want to connect with George or explore his resources further, be sure to check out his website, toroktips.com. That's T-O-R-O-K tips.com for his weekly presentation tips. Remember, whether it's through the way you speak, the energy you bring, or even how you show up visually, making the right first impression is all about showing that you care about your audience. Thanks for tuning in to the ValuePro Show. If you found this episode valuable, be sure to subscribe and leave us a review. Let's continue to inspire others. See you next time.